Happy Thursday, friends. I hope you're having a great day so far. Thanks so much for joining me on today's episode of Share Your Story with Ellie. We're back with part 2 of my conversation with Tricia. So if you missed part 1, be sure to go back and listen to Trish talk about her story of adoption, growing up in the church, learning from those she served overseas, and how she hears from God. Today's episode is so much more emotional. So here is your warning. As we mentioned, we hadn't seen each other in 3 years, and although we've talked and caught up over the phone, the couple of weeks she spent in town was really the first time we sat and processed our different experiences with losing my mom. But as our conversations typically turn out, we were able to trace back and see God's faithfulness even in the midst of our pain. Tricia also shares about her time living with us, the Bolines, her journey moving back home, and what sets her heart on fire. There's so much to be learned in this episode, so I cannot wait for you to listen. Let's jump right back in where we left off. Because a lot of learning to hear from the Lord was attached to my mom, I want to also walk back and talk through how you met my mom.
Oh, yes.
And how that journey started.
Yeah. I think I'm just going to say it just takes boldness sometimes to follow the Lord.
Yeah.
And so not sometimes, a lot of times to follow the Lord.
Yeah.
It just takes boldness and confidence in Him and what He's doing in your life. I had kind of gone through a really hard period while in missions.
Yeah.
And I remember telling the Lord, like, okay, if you want me to keep doing this, I will, but I need someone to be pouring into me. And I was like, I'm not going to do this if I don't have like a mentor, an older woman that I can just go to and share everything.
Yeah.
And so I was going to Grace Church.
Yeah, Grace Church.
Yeah. And I remember they're just pivotal in a lot of things that I was healing from. And I went up to the pastor and I just said, hey, I'm looking for a mentor. And do you have a list? Do you have some women I could ask? And so he gave me a list of them. And I was like, oh, well, I kind of knew some of the names I didn't know. And one name specifically was Jane Boline. So the interesting thing is I didn't know who your mom was.
Yeah.
But I had seen her.
Right.
And there was just something about her that I was like, oh, there's just something there. And I just really was drawn to, but, never interacted with her. And so then I asked my friend Ryan, I was like, I think it was one day in church, I said, hey, who are these ladies? And he pointed out, and when he got to your mom's name, he pointed out your mom.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my word. And I don't know if it was right after that or maybe the next Sunday, but I went up to her and I just was like, hey, you don't know me. My name is Trish and I'm looking for a mentor. And I was given your name by the pastor, and would you be interested in mentoring me or pray about mentoring me? And your mom.
Very well.
Because I was a complete stranger. She just looked at me like, okay.
I'm
and
sure
just,
eyes wide open,
like,
mouth wide open.
Just was like, what? And I don't know if I had to repeat myself again, but that's how it started. And she's like, well, let me pray about it. I'm like, yes, absolutely. And after that, I didn't see her for a while, and I was like, oh, okay, well, this wasn't of the Lord. And I was getting ready to go on a missions trip again. I'd be gone for 2 months overseas, and I just told you this story earlier that I was walking through
Avondale.
I don't know what Avondale, yeah. And I was walking by Biscotti's, and your mom was sitting out there. I don't know if it was with you or your sister. I think it was your sister.
Yeah.
But as I walked by, she's like, Trish. And I stopped and I looked. I'm like, oh, hi. and we started chit-chatting.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I remember when you asked me your request.
And you're like, yeah, months ago.
I was like, yeah. And she goes, I would love to meet with you about that. And I'm like, great. Can we put that on hold for 2 months? Because I'm going overseas. It's going to have to wait
let's
for
circle
a while.
back.
Yes. And she's like, oh, okay, yeah. So, went overseas, came back, and I don't know the timeline. I'm not a timeline person, but eventually, we did meet up, and your mom and I crack up about our first meeting because it was so awkward.
Not shocking.
We didn't know each other. And, I go to your home, beautiful home, and I go in and, she's like, do you want to sit down? Kind of like not sure herself. I'm like, yeah, sure. And, we sit on her couch and she sits at one of the chairs, and so awkward because we just had to start from the beginning. And
also she would admit that she's awkward in these situations.
Yes, she would. Totally. She's like, I just remember looking at you like, what am I doing? What is this?
What have I done?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and from there, I just love how God does that in my life with friendships and with people that he's brought in, is that very much, you don't know what it's going to be, but it turns out really beautiful. And, she's like, I'd never mentored anybody before. So I really didn't know what you were looking for.
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just knew I needed a woman of God in my life. And she was it.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell people now, is like, you need a safe place to be yourself and not be afraid of what people are going to think of your job, or if you're in ministry, or your husband. You need or your family. You need a safe place just to let it out.
Yeah.
And that when you walk away, you don't feel like guilty or ashamed or all these things when you share. Like, you walk away feeling free. And literally with your mom, that is what I felt. That is how it was all the time.
Yeah.
It is never a sense of like ashamed, or even in ministry, being able to share all the good and the bad.
Right.
Because, she was supportive of what I did, and she loved me in the ministry, even when it wasn't good, because ministry's hard and it's not always roses and all this, but we're afraid to be honest because we want to put on a picture, a persona of what things should look like. But in reality, life is hard. Ministry's hard. Family's hard, And so with your mom, that is what I gained. Like, we both grew. Like, I gained one of my dearest mentors, best friend, mother. Like, she was and she still is my mother in the faith. There's so much that I still take from when I was with her, that I'm like, she truly was the first woman in my life, besides my own mother. She was my mother in the faith. Yeah. And I learned to love Jesus because of her. I learned to love the word because of her. I learned to love prayer because of her. And other things, like I told you, like last night or the night before, it's like, here I was a missionary and I thought I had to live like a pauper, but your mom and you girls, you taught me how to like live fully in what God's given you. Don't hold back. He blesses you. So just so much I learned from her. But it was so awkward. And yet it turned out to be so beautiful.
Well, it started from so awkward, and then you lived with us for 2 years. So
yes,
that's quite the progression.
Too. That was the progression.
2+.
And
and it started. It started first. It was just a couple of weeks, right? When your roommate was getting married.
Yeah.
And
I had been living with yeah, I'd been living with someone. She was getting married, and I don't even remember how it came about for 3 weeks. Oh, I think she might have needed the apartment or something
Yeah, I
like
think
that.
her family was coming in town maybe and needed y'all's apartment or something.
Mm-hmm. And so then I stayed with you guys. I mean, I don't even know if I really had met you girls or your dad. It was just your mom, and she's like, you can come live with me. And I remember walking in the room. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like a Mary Poppins nursery room. The room that I got to stay in.
Your room.
The beds were high. They were my room. It was beautifully. I was just like, this is a dream. And then later on, when my other roommate got married, there's no one that was going to live with me, and I had to find something on my own. And your mom said, why don't you come live with us? I'm like, really? Are we sure about this? And I did. And there's so much to say. I mean,
so much. But like, I feel like for a lot of people, saying yes to that is kind of a nightmare. I mean, you were moving into a house with a middle schooler and a high schooler. Husband and wife.
Yes. Yeah.
And trying to figure out life. And you were with us in our very formative, very dramatic years.
Yeah. I was, but I think now that I think about it, I've never put this together, but I think my years in YWAM probably prepared me because
we were our own mission field.
I just had different roommates at different times. Yeah. You know, we traveled different parts of the world. You just adjusted. Yeah. And honestly, though, that's what the body is supposed to do. What your mom and dad did to bring me in. I mean, you read the book of Acts. Yeah. You know, and it says they sold everything. Yeah. They brought things together. They took care of each other. Yeah. What your mom and dad did was a picture of the body of Christ. Yeah. Bringing in someone who needed a family, who needed a home. Yeah. And I mean, we worked it out. I ate the leftovers.
That we didn't.
No, I stayed up with you. Yeah. I loved your sister. Yeah. It grew, got to know your mom's friends. Yeah. They became my friends. Yeah. I gained about 5 women in the faith as my mentors. Yeah. Yeah. And
what would you say was just learning the biggest thing you learned during that season?
Oh.
Or maybe even a top 3.
Well, 1, fashion. Not the number 1, but one of them was fashion. Yes. If you would have met me before I lived with the Bolines, I mean, Florida changes you in your fashion. I'm from North Dakota, farmland. I was tomboyish. I didn't like taking care of myself, dressing up. It was just too much work. And then I moved to Florida, and everyone like dresses up for just
any old day.
I don't know, running errands, anything. I'm like, what? So I learned a little bit before I met you guys, but you taught me about style and fashion, and I think in that God taught me how to love myself in that. Yeah. And it's okay, you know, it's okay to take care of yourself and love yourself. Yeah. Because He loves us. Right. And so I think you guys taught me that, and just having fun, like eating foods, different foods. I mean, I like the foreign foods, and I taught you guys that. You did. But you guys like taught me about restaurants and how to, you know, go to great ones. Yeah. And just your family, honestly, just like, I didn't know your dad. Your dad embraced me. Your sister didn't know me. She's probably like, who is she? What's she doing moving into my house? But I literally gained like 2 sisters in that. So that's another thing. It's like family. Like it's not always blood family. Yeah. You know, it's a family God gives you. In whatever circumstance you're in. And I mean, I was thousands of miles away from my parents. Right. And I think my mom just loved it that there was a family that took care care of me, and her dream was always to meet your mom, and that never happened. But to just thank her for loving me, and Stuart for loving me. And then I think I told you this today or yesterday. I think it was today. Is I think the one thing, the number one thing I learned in being in your home, was Jesus. And a lot of it had to be around your mom when I wasn't working, and being able to spend as much time as I did and watching to minister to people here in town or that weren't living here. And I just remember, and to this day, God still asks me the same thing when I'm struggling or I'm battling things. I remember standing in like the kitchen area. And I don't know if I'd been going through a hard time, but I was kind of in a difficult place. I still remember the moment where in my spirit, I sensed him say to me, Trish, what do you want the most? What is it that you desire the most? And I remember just saying, I just want to love you, Jesus. I want to love you well. I just want to love you. And to this day, when I go through things or I'm wrestling through things, he'll ask me, what do you want, Trish? And it's the same thing. I just want to love you, Jesus. And I want to love you well. And he's like, okay. And that really is like the foundation, I think, of who Trish, if ever anybody would ask, who is Trish? That they would say she is someone that loved Jesus well.
I can say that.
And I still remember that moment in your house is when he first put that question in my spirit.
Wow. Yeah. I would say that wholeheartedly. I would say having you in our family and living with us, it was the greatest gift God could give me, and giving me an older sister. But that was the thing I learned most. I would say it's twofold. One is that your single-heartedness, and just that above everything else, you wanted to love him and love him well, and you still do. And as a teenager going through a lot, that example of single-heartedness and faithfulness and desiring him no matter the circumstance was huge for me, because I learned so much of that from my mom, but it's different also observing it in someone who's, outside of someone who's also telling you to do your laundry. It was a gift. And also perspective, like being in high school and thinking that next test, the next practice, the next date, the friendship that was hard.
The boy.
Seems so monumental. And the way that you speak so clearly and sometimes in a way that I'm like, no, just hold me. But you offered me so much perspective, and so much of that, just because we're like 16 years apart, like being that you could have the distance of life is beyond this, but then also the worldly perspective and the church body perspective that's beyond just like, well, how are you loving God? But instead that is, Ellie, there is persecution in the world, and there are harder things, and we've got to zoom out. And that was a huge gift to me in those years that could be so singularly focused on what grade I'm going to make, or boy I'm going to be with, or whatever. And I think also seeing those female friendships, I mean, like watching, there's still to this day, being a woman who works 9 to 5, I'm like, I crave the days that I got to watch y'all just lean in and worship and pray, and led the example of praying for families, praying for deep desires, but then also our country, America, the unseen, the unborn, the unreached, worshiping, and the amount of community, like you laughed hard, you cried hard, you prayed hard, you worshiped hard, and we ate hard.
Yeah,
unless we
we
forget
did it all.
the other rule that you learned. The kitchen closes on Fridays and doesn't reopen until Sunday.
That was new for me. I was like, what? We do what? Yeah, I don't know. I think it is, like I said earlier, I never knew until this moment actually, is what your parents did, is what the body of Christ is supposed to do.
Yeah.
To invite people in their home.
Yeah.
To welcome in. It says, they will know me by your love.
Yeah.
And your parents loved me.
Yeah.
Your parents were there for me.
Yeah.
And I just remember your mom, she wrote me, I don't have it memorized, but what she wrote me when I left.
Yeah.
We needed you more than you needed us, and it's not to say like, oh, look at me, but we really don't know what we need until God puts it in our life. And it was beautiful. And I tell people when I first moved back to North Dakota, I said, I've never known what it means to be spoiled by God. But I think in the last 3 years, I truly was spoiled in the Lord by just stuff that He had to unlayer in my heart and the healing that He brought into me through different ministries, through my friends, and then through you guys and your love and your acceptance and so much. I was like, there's never been anything like that. Even now in my life, I'm like, yeah, it's great where I'm at. What God's doing is wonderful. But I think the last 2.5 to 3 years of my living in Jacksonville, I literally was spoiled in the spirit by the Lord. And I was angry moving back home, but I also know He had to undo a lot of things.
Well, let me tell you,
no
one was in denial more than me and my dad. Because, I mean, you were fully a part of the family. Like, my mom even asked for pictures of when you were little that are still framed and in your room in our house. And, and we were so like, she's our sister. She's, like even Poppy had fully, he got the story wrong for a little bit and kept telling people that Jenny Stewart adopted a little girl, which is not the case. And he also loved you so dearly.
Love Poppy. Love Poppy.
But no one was in denial more than me and my dad. We were like, she's not leaving. She's not leaving. I know she says God called her, but she's staying. She's staying. And I mean, all of us red-faced, bald. I mean, the day you drove off to go, and we knew you were called, but oh my gosh, it was the hardest. It was the hardest.
It was hard as well.
Yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah. And then you forgot something and had to turn around and come and grab it. And we had to do it all over again 15 minutes later.
All over again.
Even Molly was sad.
That's the way I say goodbye. I always leave something behind so I can come back and say goodbye again. Hasn't changed. Do it all the time.
Perfect.
Now.
I'll expect that in the next couple of days then too.
Yes. I know.
I can't wait. Yeah. But what spurred you to say it was time, not you to say, for God to tell you it was time to move back home?
Oh my gosh, it was not me at all. Let me tell you, it was not me.
Yeah.
I loved my life here. I loved Florida. I loved the church I was going to. I loved my friends. I loved you guys.
Yeah.
I loved the beach.
Yes.
I love that, Christmas. It could be sunny sometimes. It was not negative 32.
Definitely not.
It was not in my game plan at all to move back. And it really was the Lord. And what it was is I went back to school after YWAM. I really thought I was going to move overseas to be a missionary long term. But I felt like He's like, you need to finish school.
Yeah.
And I had different thoughts of what that would look like, but it ended up being nursing. And I mean, I started the courses here for nursing.
Yep.
I became a CNA. I was working at a nursing home. So I was like, yeah, okay, we'll do this. And then I went home for my brother's wedding. And I remember driving by the nursing program that I eventually went to.
Yeah.
And I just felt like the Lord put in my heart, you need to go visit that. I'm like, okay, sure. Not really thinking anything of
Right.
it. And so I went back a couple days later and toured it on my mom's minivan, driving up. And I was like, you are not doing this. I am not doing this. I just knew in that moment it's what he was doing. And I was like, there's no way. So I was in denial for I don't know how long, but eventually I applied to the nursing program and I got in here in Bismarck. I got in.
Yeah.
And I moved. So that was August. And then the following August I had gone in, but I wouldn't start till January.
Yeah.
And I had to let people know. And December came. But before I moved, I think God is good. It doesn't always happen. But it did for me in this moment is there's a women's conference at the church that I went to. And the speaker just kind of had us spread out and just have a moment with the Lord. And as I was standing there, I just remember closing my eyes and just kind of waiting on him. And I just remember him telling me, I'm sending you back because you walked through a lot of healing and you've learned a lot about me and you've grown and you have things to offer now.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it was like, it just resonated in my spirit. And in that moment, like I could fully say yes to moving home. It was still hard.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, like I knew like tangibly I was going back for school, but there was something still missing. It was the spiritual aspect of why God was moving me back.
Right.
And when he laid that in my heart, I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do it, Lord. You've given me a purpose now.
Especially because it comes back to that place of you want to know him and love him well. And if he can affirm that purpose he has, it's not easy, but you're willing to step in.
Yeah. And then I moved back and my plan was not to stay up there.
Yeah.
My plan was to finish school and either become a travel nurse, but definitely not stay in North Dakota.
Yeah.
Because I just did not like winter. I did not like it. But things were different and my life had been different. What I had known when I moved away was not the same. It's like, no, I'm not staying. And 12 years later, almost 13 years later, I'm still there.
Gosh.
And
yeah.
And it's good. It is. I love where he has me.
Yeah.
I've grown a lot. I've learned a lot. And I just love him.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
And so I never thought I would do a podcast, that's for sure. So even this is a stretch. And a stretch. So I'm like, see, he's always asking you to step out. And I do.
Yeah,
and
you do.
Because I love him.
Yeah, and it's because you love him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that move in general was, I think, so hard for so many reasons, but I think especially walking through my mom's diagnosis and whatnot and not kind of having you there, but in a lot of ways, even you're becoming a nurse was so, it equipped you in ways we didn't know we needed because my mom's very private. I mean, if she, which I know she knows, but if I had to ask her permission to share so many of her details on a podcast, she would tell me, absolutely not. And here I keep going. But especially,
tidbits.
yes,
Tidbits.
exactly. Not full things, but, especially when she was diagnosed, she's a very private person. And I'm sure you also observed and learned that, living with her. And the thing about when you're diagnosed with something that intense is everyone wants to know and everyone wants to be a part of the team, which is a really beautiful thing. But for someone who was diagnosed with something really intense out of nowhere and also likes to remain very much in her own safe environment, it's a lot. And I just remember the first round of chemo that she went through and how terrible it really, really was. Torture. I remember being like, this is what hell must be like and what demons like must do to torture, because it was awful. But her second round, you were there, and because you two are so close and you had so much of that history, you shepherded us through so much of just like when to take what medicine, when you can eat, how to, and it was in that it was such a gift of like, he saw so fit that y'all had such a close relationship, but you could care for her in a way that no one else could, and none of us were equipped for. And sorry.
No, it's okay.
I just remember being like, this is just another reason why God knew I needed an older sister, you know? And it was, you continued in the process of that, like, you served so many roles because you're a fierce prayer warrior, an encourager. You hear from the Lord. You have medical background, and you're just a member of the family. And so just through all of it, I really, I'm so grateful. And you were the call I had, when things were really getting intense. And, it's like I knew I needed to ask you medically what stuff meant and how to walk through it. But more than that, I was asking, I think, just for that sisterly wisdom. And you always told me the truth. You still do, even when I don't want to hear it. And I remember calling you and you saying, I know we've had these visions. I know we've had these prayers. I know we've had these dreams. But Ellie, I think you need to let her go. And I think you need to surrender her back. And it was the very next day. The very next day. And among so many seasons, even still now, God just used you to really shepherd me and sister me. And I'm just so grateful. And then you also rushed into town soon after. And were there with us and for us. And that hasn't stopped. You know? And I'm just grateful.
It is. Your mom, like I said earlier, she was my mother in the faith, you know, and I mean, we've talked about this, but just not being able to say goodbye was and has been probably the hardest thing for me. But in my own way, I got to do it during my mom's treatment. To really say goodbye to your mom for the first time. I walked through that with my own mom. And I know I haven't seen your sister. She doesn't live here. But what I hear of you, what you say of her, and what I see of you, it's the fruit of what your mom did. It's the fruit of what your mom
Yeah.
poured into you. It's the fruit of so many things that she prayed for you and your sister. And I know people don't like saying this, but I honestly don't
care.
I'm just saying, it's like, I don't really feel like I did that much for your family, but I think that's the beauty of walking with Jesus, is that when you really love him, you don't have an agenda except to love him. And I didn't have a place to stay, and your mom invited me into your home. And then God did the rest. God knew I needed your mom. God knew I needed you and Mary Claire and your dad and even your extended family. Because I learned and watched so much from that, and hearing prayers that are being answered now that I knew your mom prayed. Like that to me is like just the beauty of the love of God. His nature is that he is faithful. He is faithful.
Yeah.
He is faithful. And like you said in the very beginning, we haven't seen each other in like 3 years. It's been a while since I've lived with and that I have the grace to be able to share truth and love to you. That's only because God's given that gift. It's nothing I did. It's because we love him. And he gives us these opportunities. He said, love me, follow me. That's all I've ever wanted to do, is to love and follow him. And it is to think that, I moved away. It was torture to move away from your mom.
Yeah.
Really, it really was. And to think, like, years later, the gift that he was instilling in me as a nurse, he would use to help you, And so, like being adopted into the family of God, being adopted into other families, not just my physical, but other families. That's my story. Like,
wow.
I am. There's so many families I've been adopted into. And I think it's just so beautiful. And I wish more and more people would do that. Like, you would just open your home to people, singles, widows, orphans. He's not asking us to do some grand thing. All he's saying is love well, serve well. And if we're doing that, what does that do? What fruit comes out of that 10, 15 years later? And so, I love your mom. I always will. She's an incredible woman of God, and so amazing to have been able to be your friend and do life with her. And now I see you, and I see what you are doing and how you're growing and maturing in the Lord, and I hear how your sister's growing. These 2 teenagers I moved into now are women.
I know, say it ain't so. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah.
And so,
I think that's the most beautiful way that you could put that your story is one of being adopted into families, his family first, and then each of these places.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we could foster communities like that we are constantly adopting into and being adopted into, knowing that first and foremost we are his. You teach me that all the time through good questions, hard truths, giggles.
I learned from the test, my mom and then your mom, because your mom would be like, "This is gonna hurt." I'm like, "Thanks, Shane." And my mom does it all the time to me. I'm like,
yes.
don't you love me?
Oh, how many
like,
times
do.
just in the last week have you said, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't think you're going to like it.
Yeah. And I could tell when she did not like it. I was like, oh,
but I
not
come
like
around.
this. But she comes around, but like
Yeah.
all of us. It is truth and love. Truth and love. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what Jesus did. He spoke truth and love, and it wasn't always beautiful, but he did it because he loved.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Well, Trish, I cannot say enough about
Ellie.
how much you mean to me. I've clearly bawled on this episode unintentionally. Just, you've been a gift to me in so many ways. And the final question before, actually, I'm going to ask you two questions. The first question is the last final question I always ask. What is the one word you would choose to describe the current chapter of your story?
Oh, well, because I'm on vacation and because I'm starting a new job, the word when I came down here, I felt like the Lord said was reset. But I don't think that's it. I think it's new life.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So in many ways, not just spiritually, but my job's changing, different opportunities when I go back home. There's a newness. Newness is coming.
That's beautiful. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm believing that for you. I'm excited to pray into that and walk with you through it. But the one final question, I would love if you would just say a prayer over who's listening, with that being your gifting. I know. I put you on the spot.
Okay. No.
Okay.
I'll try not to go for 30 minutes.
We have a tendency to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Father, I just thank you for your presence in our life. I thank you for your presence in the ones who are battling in their faith right now. I thank you for the ones who are doing well in their walk with you, but they hunger for more. And the ones who kind of are like lukewarm. I thank you for your faithfulness to all of us. And God, I thank you for the testimony that you have brought from death. You have brought life. Myself and Ellie and those who are listening. You're a God of life. You're a God of abundance. And sometimes we don't fully see it when we're in the midst of whatever we may be walking. But your word says the treasures of heaven are for us to obtain. You hold nothing back from us. And so God, if anything during this time and sharing the story, just ask, Lord, that whether a man, a woman, a young adult, they would just know deep within their spirit that you are faithful and you are present, and that the journey they're on is a journey of victory in you if they choose you. God, because you have won. The battle's been won. And what I'm learning more and more is that we are on the winning side. So, Lord, I just thank you for the victory they're walking in. Even if it may seem like they're walking in the valley of the shadow of death, they're still walking in victory because you are their shelter. You are their hiding place. So, God, I thank you for what you're doing. I ask that this time we just bring glory to you, Lord. That one who maybe has not decided to follow you will choose to follow you. The one who's wrestling what their purpose in life would know that their purpose is found in you. And those who need to take a step of faith and boldness would just say, Jesus, give me boldness to step out. God, we just thank you We thank you for the legacy that you've placed in each one of us because of what your son has done. And we just say we're open and available. Use us. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Trish. I love you. I love you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for stepping out
I
in
love you
boldness to do this.
You're welcome. My one and only.
We'll see.
Probably.
Gosh, this conversation was so healing for the both of us, and I hope you took something away from it too. I think it's so important to look back over the years with fresh eyes as to see how we were uniquely equipped and protected during past seasons of life. God knew I would need Tricia in many seasons of life, and I'm so thankful for the way she shares her faith and her experiences with me. I learned so much from her, including the discipline to continue praying and pressing into God when life seems like a constant struggle, how to continually surrender God's will for my life, and how to giggle and appreciate the small things. I'd really love to hear what you learned from these 2 episodes, so please chime in on Instagram. You can find the podcast at Share Your Story with Ellie and comment on any of the posts about Tricia. While you're there, please make sure to follow me and the show so we can continue to share stories together. And while you're at it, I'd so appreciate it if you would subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps this community grow. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will see you back here on Tuesday.